Stop pretending you belong in this family. You're nothing to us anymore. The words came from my grandson Ethan, his voice sharp, echoing through the dining room like a slap. He was only 21, tall and confident, with the arrogance of someone who'd never been hungry, never worked for scraps, never known what sacrifice looked like. I froze, my fork trembling in my hand as his mother, my own daughter, Claire, looked away, pretending not to hear. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe he'd been joking, maybe he'd said it in jest, maybe my ears were playing tricks on me. But no, his eyes, cold, piercing, unflinching, left no room for doubt. "Ethan," I whispered, my throat tight. "What did you just say to me?" He leaned back in his chair, smirking, as if he'd been waiting to unleash this venom. "I said you don't belong here. You're always hanging around like you own the place. This is Mom and Dad's house, not yours. You've overstayed your welcome." I looked to Claire, my daughter, the child I had carried in my belly for 9 long months, the baby I had raised on my back when her father died too young. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she busied herself cutting her steak, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Claire?" I asked, my voice trembling. Is this how you feel too?" Finally, she sighed, placing her fork down with exaggerated patience. "Mother, don't start. Ethan's just saying what we've all been thinking. You've been here for months now. It's not good for you or for us. You need to think about moving on. As if I was some old piece of furniture they were too polite to throw out onto the curb. I could barely breathe. Just 6 months earlier, I had given them nearly my entire savings, $48,000, to help them renovate this very house. Claire had called me in tears, saying the roof was leaking, the pipes were breaking, and they were drowning in debt. I'd written the check with shaking hands, telling myself this was family, this was love, this was what mothers did. Now, sitting at the very table my money had replaced, in a dining room my money had rebuilt, I was being told I didn't belong. "You ungrateful." My voice cracked before I could finish. I pushed my plate away and rose to my feet, my knees wobbling under me. "How dare you speak to me like this? Everything in this house, every nail, every tile, you wouldn't have it without me." Ethan rolled his eyes. "God, Grandma, stop acting like you're some hero. You gave us money once. That doesn't mean you own us. You're just bitter because you're old and lonely. Old, lonely, disposable." My chest burned with humiliation. The room tilted slightly, my balance faltering as I gripped the back of my chair for support. Claire stood now, her expression sharp with irritation. "Mother, please. Don't make a scene. Ethan's right. We can't keep living like this. You staying here it's suffocating. We need our own space." I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly voiceless. I went upstairs silently that night, my legs heavy, my eyes burning. The guest room, that's what they always called it. Never your room, never home. I shut the door and sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding in my ears. On the nightstand, I kept an old framed photograph of my late husband, George. His smile beamed at me from behind the glass, the same steady smile that had carried me through 40 years of life together. "George," I whispered into the dark. "They've turned on me. Our own daughter. Our grandson. They think I don't belong." My voice cracked as tears spilled down my cheeks. But I won't let them break me. Not this time. That night, as I lay awake, listening to the muffled laughter of Claire and Ethan downstairs, something inside me shifted. It wasn't brokenness. It wasn't defeat. It was something colder, sharper, like steel sliding into place. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase. No one noticed. Claire was on the phone with her friends. Ethan had gone out. I walked out of the front door without a goodbye, the autumn air crisp against my face. But I didn't go far. I checked into a modest motel on the edge of town. From there, I started making calls. My lawyer, Mrs. Patel, had handled George's estate after he passed. She was efficient, no nonsense, and had always looked out for me. "Mrs. Patel," I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled around the receiver. "I need you to dig up some papers for me. The documents from when I gave Claire and her husband the renovation money." There was a pause. "Of course, but may I ask why?" "Because," I said, my throat tightening with both fear and fury, "my daughter and grandson have decided I don't belong in my own family, and I want to see exactly what they signed when they took my money." Silence hummed for a moment, then Mrs. Patel replied, her tone crisp. "I'll pull everything today. You might be surprised at how much power you actually have." That word, power, settled into my chest like an ember. Later that afternoon, a thick envelope arrived at the motel. I spread the papers out across the small desk, my heart racing as I read every line. My hand flew to my mouth. There it was in black and white. A clause Mrs. Patel had insisted on when I hesitated to part with so much money. A lien against the property, secured in my name. If they defaulted or failed to honor my contribution, I had the right to claim partial ownership or force a sale. "Oh, George," I whispered, clutching his photo from my purse. "They thought I was powerless. They thought I was just an old woman with nowhere to go. But I still have teeth." That night I slept soundly for the first time in months. The betrayal still burned, but beneath it pulsed something stronger. Resolve. Claire and Ethan didn't know it yet, but the woman they had tried to discard was about to become their worst nightmare. I returned to the motel the next evening after a long walk, clutching the documents like they were my lifeline. For years, I had thought of myself as nothing more than a mother and grandmother, someone whose only role was to give, to support, to sacrifice. But reading those papers changed something inside me. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't disposable. I was, in fact, a co-owner of their perfect home. The irony of it made me smile bitterly. They had looked me in the eye, dismissed me like I was nothing but dead weight, all while living under a roof secured by my sacrifice. If I wanted, I could drag their precious house into the market and watch strangers stroll through, picking apart the rooms they thought belonged to them. But revenge isn't about speed. It's about patience. About letting arrogance ripen into desperation. That night, I sat at the motel's tiny desk with a pad of paper and began writing down every humiliation I'd endured in Claire's house over the past 6 months. Every cruel remark Ethan had made, every time Claire rolled her eyes when I offered advice, every dinner where they whispered about me as if I couldn't hear. The list grew longer than I expected, and with each line I wrote, my resolve hardened. I wasn't just going to leave quietly. I was going to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The following week, I met Mrs. Patel in her office. The walls were lined with dark bookshelves, heavy with leather-bound files. She adjusted her glasses as I slid the papers across her desk. "So," she said, scanning the documents, "this lien gives you leverage. Technically, you're a secured creditor on the property. You have the right to demand repayment or force the issue." I folded my hands, my nails digging into my palms. "What does that mean in plain English, dear?" She smiled thinly. "It means your daughter and grandson can't throw you away like trash. Legally, you own a piece of that house. If they want you gone, they'll have to pay dearly for it. Or lose everything. I sat back, exhaling slowly. The words were like music. Finally, for once, I wasn't the one begging. Mrs. Patel leaned forward. Do you want to move forward immediately? For a moment, the temptation burned. I imagined Claire's shocked face when the notice arrived, Ethan's cocky smirk wiped clean. But then I shook my head. Not yet. Let them think they've won. Let them feel safe. I want them comfortable before I take the floor out from under their feet. Mrs. Patel's brows arched, but she nodded. Very well. Just say the word. When I checked out of the motel, I didn't return to Claire's house. Instead, I rented a small studio apartment across town. It wasn't much, bare walls, creaky floors, but it was mine. And from that quiet place, I began to weave my plan. I didn't cut off contact immediately. That would have been too easy for them. Instead, I answered Claire's calls with polite calm, pretending to be the weary old woman they believed me to be. When she asked if I'd found somewhere to stay, I lied smoothly. Oh yes, a friend had a spare room. I'll be fine, she sounded almost relieved. That's good, Mother. I knew you'd understand. You know, it's healthier for you too. Your own space. Healthier. That word made me laugh after I hung up. Healthier to be discarded by your own blood? Healthier to eat alone in silence while your family celebrates without you? No, Claire didn't care about my health. She cared about her comfort. Ethan didn't bother to call at all. Weeks went by, and the boy who had once run to me for cookies after school didn't even send a message. My blood boiled each time I thought of his sneer. His words, "Stop pretending you belong." Fine, I would stop pretending. Instead, I would make sure he and his mother understood exactly what belonging really meant. By mid-November, my plan was ready. I met Mrs. Patel again, this time with a steadier voice. I want to file the notice, quietly, no fanfare yet, just the first step. She prepared the documents swiftly. This will send a formal letter of intent. They'll have 30 days to respond. If they don't, we move to enforcement. They'll realize quickly what it means. My chest thrummed with a mixture of dread and exhilaration. Send it. 2 days later, the calls began. First, Claire. Her voice wavered between confusion and anger. Mother, what is this letter? Some kind of mistake? It says you have a lien on the house. That you can force a sale? What is going on? I let her words hang in the air before I answered. It's no mistake. When you begged me for that money, my lawyer insisted on protections. I didn't tell you because I trusted you. But you made it clear I don't belong. So now, Claire, I'm simply exercising my rights. Her breath hitched audibly. You wouldn't. This is our home. No, dear, I said softly. It's our home. You and I both. That's what the papers say. The next day, Ethan called. Unlike his mother, he didn't bother with niceties. Grandma, what the hell do you think you're doing? Are you trying to ruin us? I let the venom in his tone roll off me like rain. Ruining you? No, Ethan, I'm teaching you. You told me to stop pretending I belong. So I won't pretend anymore. I'll claim what is mine. He cursed, shouted, but I ended the call with a calm click. For the first time in months, I felt alive. Weeks passed, and the pressure mounted on their side. Claire called almost daily, her voice shifting from pleading to angry to desperate. Mother, please. Think of Ethan. Think of me. We'll find a way to make this work. Don't humiliate us like this. But I remembered every humiliation she had served me. Every time she let Ethan insult me without rebuke. Every time she reduced me to just a guest. Now the roles had reversed. She was the one begging, I, the discarded old woman, was the one holding the strings. and I wasn't about to let go. One evening, I sat by my window in the small apartment, the city lights glowing faintly beyond the glass. I thought of George again, his steady hands, his gentle voice. They thought I was weak, I whispered to his picture. But you knew better. You always knew I had steel in me. I smiled then, slow and sharp. Because the truth was undeniable now. The battle had only just begun, and I was ready to fight to the last breath. The letter had done its work. By the second week of December, Claire was practically unraveling on the phone. She tried everything: guilt, nostalgia, even false tenderness. Mother, don't you remember Christmas when you baked Ethan those gingerbread cookies? You're part of us. Why are you doing this? I let her words drip into my ear like poison, but answered coolly. Yes, I remember, Claire. I also remember this past Christmas when Ethan told me to stop pretending I belonged. You both decided where I stood in this family. Now I'm simply honoring your choice. She sobbed then, trying to mask it with a cough. You'll destroy us. Do you understand that? Maybe destruction, I said softly, is exactly what you need to understand value. I ended the call before she could respond. Days later, I received an unexpected visitor. Ethan. He arrived at my small apartment, still wearing his college jacket. His hair messy, his arrogance slightly dimmed. I watched through the peephole as he shifted impatiently, then knocked again. I opened the door slowly. Grandma, he said, his voice strained. We need to talk. I stepped aside, letting him in. He looked around the tiny space. Bare walls, modest furniture, nothing like the spacious home he thought was his. So this is where you've been hiding, he muttered. I raised a brow. Not hiding, Ethan. Waiting. He sat down heavily on the chair, running a hand through his hair. Look, I shouldn't have said what I said that night. Okay, I was stressed. I didn't mean it. Oh, but you did, I corrected him gently. And you meant it enough that your mother didn't stop you. She agreed. Remember? He flinched. Grandma, please. We can't lose the house. Mom's freaking out. Dad's working overtime. He stopped, his bravado cracking for a moment. I'm scared. That admission surprised me, but I didn't let it soften me. Scared is good, I said evenly. Scared makes people pay attention. He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine. What do you want? Money? An apology? Tell me what it'll take to make this go away. I leaned forward, folding my hands. What I want, Ethan, is respect. What I want is for you to understand that family isn't a free ride. I gave everything for your mother, for you. And what did I get in return? Insults, neglect, loneliness. You wanted me gone, and now you'll learn what it feels like to truly lose. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. You wouldn't actually sell the house? I smiled slowly. Wouldn't I? He shifted uncomfortably, then stood. This isn't over. No, I said quietly, watching him walk to the door. It's only beginning. By January, the 30-day deadline was approaching, and Claire grew more desperate with each passing day. She called one evening, her voice frantic. Mother, please meet me. Let's talk face to face. Not lawyers, not threats. Just us, I agreed, though not out of kindness. I wanted to see her squirm. We met at a small cafe downtown. Claire arrived in her designer coat, her makeup flawless, but her hands shook as she stirred her coffee. Mother, she began, you're making a mistake. We're family. We say things in anger, but deep down we love you. You know that, I stared at her, unblinking. Love? Is that what you call it when your son tells his grandmother she doesn't belong? When you sit in silence while he humiliates me in my own kitchen? When you take my money and then toss me aside like garbage? Her face flushed, and for a moment I saw shame flicker across her features. But then her jaw tightened. You don't understand. Things have been hard. Stress, bills, Ethan's tuition. We snapped. That doesn't mean we don't care. I leaned forward, my voice sharp as glass. You cared when you needed me. You cared when my money paid for your comfort. But the moment I became inconvenient, I was nothing to you. That isn't care, Claire. That's exploitation. Her eyes welled with tears. Please don't do this. Don't take our home. I sipped my tea slowly, savoring the taste of her fear. Then give me one reason, one real reason not to. She opened her mouth, but no words came. She looked down, broken. Finally, I stood, gathering my purse. Exactly. You have no reason, and I have every right. I left her there, shaking, the untouched coffee growing cold. That night, as I sat in my apartment, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Claire. It was Mrs. Patel. Good evening, she said briskly. I thought you should know. The court has acknowledged your filing. If they don't meet the repayment terms by the deadline, proceedings for forced sale will begin. A slow smile spread across my face. Thank you, Mrs. Patel, she hesitated. Are you certain you want to follow through? This could devastate your daughter. I looked at George's photo on the windowsill, his steady gaze giving me strength. Devastation, I whispered, is sometimes the only teacher left. The next week was a blur of chaos. Claire left dozens of voicemails, her voice cracking with panic. Ethan sent text after text, alternating between threats and apologies. But I ignored them all. Instead, I began imagining what life would look like after the house was mine. I saw myself walking through those halls again, not as a discarded guest, but as an owner. As the one who had the final word, and the image filled me with something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Then just 2 days before the deadline, Claire appeared at my apartment door. Her makeup was streaked, her hair unkempt. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of fear had pressed her down. Mother, she whispered when I opened the door. Please don't do this. We'll pay you back, I promise. Just give us more time. I studied her, my daughter, my flesh and blood, trembling on my doorstep. Part of me ached, wanted to take her in my arms, tell her it would be okay, but then I remembered Ethan's sneer. You don't belong here, and the ache hardened into stone. Time, I said slowly, is something you've already stolen from me. I gave you decades, Claire. I gave you everything. And in return, you gave me nothing but cruelty. So no, I won't give you more time. Her face crumpled as tears spilled down her cheeks. Please. I closed the door gently but firmly, the sound echoing in the hallway. On the other side, I heard her sobbing, and for the first time, I didn't feel weak listening to it. I felt strong. The deadline arrived on a bitterly cold morning in late January. I awoke early, my hands trembling not with weakness, but with anticipation. Today everything shifted. By noon, Mrs. Patel called. Her tone was professional, clipped. They failed to meet the repayment terms, Mrs. Harris. I've filed the next step. The court will now recognize your right to enforce a sale. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me. I could almost hear George's voice in the silence. You've done what needed to be done. That afternoon, I took a walk past Claire's house. Their house, my house. The windows were lit, and inside I saw shadows moving, Ethan pacing, Claire clutching her head, her husband standing stiffly by the kitchen counter. They looked like a family under siege. And in a way, they were. They hadn't noticed me standing on the sidewalk across the street, bundled in my coat. But I noticed them, and I savored it. The very next day, my phone rang. It wasn't Claire this time. It was Ethan. His voice cracked with the kind of desperation I'd never heard from him before. "Grandma, please. Don't do this. Don't take the house." I sat in my chair, the documents spread neatly before me, my tea steaming beside me. "Take the house? Ethan, you misunderstand. I'm not taking anything. I'm simply reclaiming what is mine." His breath hitched. "We'll have nowhere to go. Mom's losing it. Dad's furious. His voice broke. "I was wrong. About everything I said. You do belong. You always did." I was just too stupid to see it. I let his words hang there. For the first time, the arrogance had drained from him, leaving only a frightened boy. "You said," I reminded him softly, "that I was nothing. That I didn't belong." "Do you know what that does to a person, Ethan? To hear it from her own grandson." He sniffled. "I didn't mean it, but you did," I said firmly. "And now you'll live with it." He begged a little longer, but I ended the call. Mercy wasn't mine to give anymore. 2 weeks later, I attended the first court hearing. Claire and her husband sat across the aisle, their lawyer whispering urgently to them. Ethan slumped beside them, his head bowed. When my name was called, I walked to the front with steady steps. My cane clicked softly against the polished floor, each tap echoing like a drumbeat. The judge looked over the documents, his expression impassive. Mrs. Patel explained everything clearly: the lien, the unpaid debt, the default. By the end, it was undeniable. "Mrs. Harris," the judge said, "you are within your legal rights to proceed with a forced sale of the property." Claire gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan's head snapped up, his face pale. As for me, I felt nothing but calm. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "That is my wish." The gavel struck, and in that moment, their world began to crumble. Outside the courthouse, Claire rushed up to me, tears streaming down her face. "Mother, please," she cried, clutching at my sleeve. "You don't have to do this. We'll figure out a way. Just give us one more chance." I looked at her hand gripping my coat, the same hand that had pushed me aside at dinner, the same hand that had gestured for Ethan to be quiet when he'd spat his cruelty at me. I gently pulled free. "One more chance?" I repeated. "How many chances did I give you, Claire? How many times did I swallow your insults, overlook your neglect, and still give everything I had? No, your chances are over." Her shoulders shook as she sobbed, but I turned and walked away, the winter sun casting my shadow long against the pavement. Word spread quickly. By February, the neighborhood was buzzing. Claire had always prided herself on appearances: perfect dinners, perfect garden, perfect family. But now, whispers followed her everywhere. "Did you hear? Her mother's forcing them to sell. She took their house out from under them. They said she begged for money and then threw her mother out." I knew Claire could hear it too. And that was part of the justice. Not just the legal hammer, but the public shame. The same way she had humiliated me in silence, she was now humiliated in front of everyone. One evening, a letter arrived at my apartment. It wasn't official, just a folded note, messy handwriting on lined paper. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I was wrong. I treated you horribly, and I can't take it back. I know you'll never forgive me, but I don't want you to hate me forever." It wasn't signed, but I knew Ethan's hand immediately. For a moment, I felt something tug at me. A grandmother's instinct, the urge to comfort, to forgive. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when he spat those words at me. The disdain, the dismissal, forgiveness I thought wasn't free. By March, the sale was inevitable. Realtors began visiting the house, strangers walking through, taking notes, inspecting closets. Claire called me in fury one evening. "You've humiliated us." Do you understand that? People I've known for years are seeing our house listed like we're some charity case. I listened calmly. "Yes, Claire, I understand. Just as you understood when you humiliated me in my own dining room." Her silence was bitter. Finally, she whispered, "You'll regret this." "No, dear," I replied softly. "I'll never regret teaching you what it feels like to be powerless." And I meant it. The day the for sale sign went up, I drove past slowly. Ethan stood on the porch, his arms crossed, his face drawn and pale. Claire was inside, pulling curtains closed as though that would shield her from the world. I rolled down my window just enough for him to see me. Our eyes locked. He didn't shout this time, didn't sneer. He just looked away, his jaw clenched. And in that small gesture, I saw it. Defeat. But this story wasn't over yet. Owning their house was only the beginning. Because soon, very soon, Ethan and Claire would learn the full meaning of justice. When the very woman they cast out walked back through that door, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as their landlady, and they would have no choice but to bow their heads and pay. The sale happened faster than even I expected. By April, the papers were signed, the ownership transferred, and the deed bore my name alongside the bank's. Mrs. Patel handed me the folder, her eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. "Congratulations, Mrs. Harris," she said. "You're now the legal owner. They'll remain as tenants under transitional agreement, unless you'd prefer to remove them entirely." Remove them. The temptation was strong. To see Claire and Ethan dragging their belongings out into the street, suitcases piled high, neighbors whispering. It would have been delicious, but no, I wanted something deeper. "I'll let them stay," I told Mrs. Patel, my lips curving into a thin smile. "But on my terms." The first time I returned to the house, Claire opened the door. Her face drained of color the moment she saw me standing there with the keys. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I held up the papers. "I'm your landlady now." Behind her, Ethan appeared, his jaw tightening. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. "The boy who once told me I didn't belong couldn't even meet my eyes." "Step aside," I said calmly. "This is my property." The words cut sharper than any insult they had ever thrown at me. I walked past them into the foyer, my cane tapping against the hardwood floors I had once paid to polish. The air smelled the same, lavender candles, lemon polish, but everything felt different, because this time the power was mine. I gathered them in the living room. Claire sat stiffly, her hands wringing in her lap. Ethan leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, but his bravado was gone. "I'll make this simple," I began. "You will pay rent. On time, every month. You will treat this property with respect because it belongs to me. If you fail, I'll have you out by the end of the week." Claire's voice cracked. "Rent? From us?" "This is our home." "No," I corrected, my tone firm. "It was your home. Now it's my house, and you are merely tenants." Ethan finally snapped, his pride flaring. "You're cruel. You're doing this just to humiliate us." I turned to him slowly. "Cruel? You looked into your grandmother's eyes and told her she didn't belong. You watched me leave with nothing. You let your mother discard me like trash. And now you speak of cruelty?" "No, Ethan. This is justice." He looked away, shame painting his face red. The first rent payment came in May. Claire arrived at my apartment, the envelope trembling in her hands. She placed it on my table like a guilty child handing in late homework. "I hope you're happy," she said bitterly. I looked at the envelope, then at her. "Happy? No, satisfied?" "Yes." She turned away, muttering under her breath. But I caught it. "Monster," I smiled faintly. If protecting myself makes me a monster, so be it. Better a monster than a fool. Weeks passed and the humiliation deepened for them. The neighbors noticed, of course. They saw Claire and Ethan driving to my apartment to hand over rent checks. They whispered in grocery aisles, at church, at block parties. I heard one woman whisper to another, "Imagine paying rent to your own mother." I'd never recover from the shame, and Claire heard it too. Her once proud posture shrank day by day. Even Ethan grew quieter, no longer strutting like he owned the world. They were learning. Slowly, painfully, but they were learning. One night, I received a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there. His shoulders slumped, his eyes dull. "Grandma," he said softly. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat at my small kitchen table, staring at his hands. "I don't know how to say this," he began, his voice low. "But I was wrong. About everything. I treated you horribly. I thought you were just someone we had to put up with. I didn't see what you'd done for us. I didn't care, and now I can't stop thinking about it." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. I needed to hear more. He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, truly. I know it's too late, but I needed you to hear it." For a long moment, silence hung heavy between us. Then I reached across the table, my wrinkled hand covering his trembling one. "It's not too late," I whispered. "But sorry is only the beginning. You need to change, Ethan. You need to become a man who respects, who cares, who understands sacrifice. Words alone won't save you." He nodded quickly, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I will. I promise." For the first time in months, I believed him. Claire, however, remained defiant. Each rent payment came with cold stares and bitter mutters. She avoided me whenever possible, her pride too wounded to admit what Ethan had begun to realize. But even she couldn't escape the truth. At the end of June, the property taxes were due. Claire called me, her voice shaking. "Mother, can you cover the taxes this year? We're stretched thin with Ethan's school and the bills." I almost laughed. "Cover the taxes? Claire, dear, I am the property owner. You're the tenant. Those taxes are mine to pay, and I will pay them with the money you give me every month. Do you see how this works now?" Her silence was heavy. Finally, she whispered, "I hate you." I didn't flinch. "No, Claire. You hate yourself. Because for once, you can't control me. And that's something you'll have to live with." By July, something remarkable began to happen. Ethan started working weekends at a local hardware store. He sent me part of his paycheck one evening, along with a note. "Grandma, this is my contribution. I want to help, not just take." I stared at the note for a long time, my heart swelling. Maybe there was hope after all. Claire noticed too, and though she tried to hide it, I saw the cracks in her defiance. The way she lingered when I visited the house, the way her voice softened when she spoke of Ethan's efforts. Perhaps slowly, the lesson was sinking in. Still, I wasn't done. Justice wasn't complete until they understood fully. One evening, as the sun set over the neighborhood, I stood in the very kitchen where Ethan had once told me I didn't belong. The counters gleamed, the air smelled of dinner, and Claire sat stiffly at the table, Ethan beside her. I leaned on my cane, my gaze steady. "You told me once," I said, my eyes on Ethan, to stop pretending I belonged. But look around. Who owns this house now? He lowered his head. You do. And who decides whether you stay or go? You do. And who? I asked softly, my voice sharp as a blade. Was right all along about the meaning of family? Neither of them answered. They didn't need to. Their silence was confession enough. I smiled then, a small, satisfied smile. Because the woman they had discarded now held the keys to everything they thought was theirs. And for the first time, I felt not just strong, but free. August arrived heavy with heat, and with it came the renewal of their lease. Mrs. Patel prepared the documents crisp and merciless. When I handed them across the table in the living room, Claire's hand trembled as she signed. Ethan hesitated, staring at the line where his name belonged. "Grandma," he whispered, "do you have to keep us here like this?" I tilted my head. "Like what, Ethan?" "Like tenants. It feels wrong." I leaned forward, my eyes steady on his. "It feels wrong because it is wrong. Family should never have come to this. But you brought it here, remember? You looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong. You reduced me to nothing. And now you live by the words you chose." He said nothing more, just signed, his hand shaking. Afterward, I walked through the house alone. Each room whispered memories, me helping Claire with her school projects at the kitchen table, Ethan toddling across the living room floor, George sitting on the porch with a cigar after Sunday dinners. But the rooms whispered something else, too. Betrayal, arrogance, neglect. I paused in the guest room, the one they never let me call mine. I ran my hand along the dresser, remembering the night I packed my suitcase in silence while they plotted to turn the room into an office. Now it was empty, silent, waiting. I smiled faintly. "Not a guest anymore," I murmured. In September, Ethan surprised me again. He knocked on my apartment door one evening, holding a grocery bag. "I brought dinner," he said awkwardly. Inside was roasted chicken, vegetables, and a small chocolate cake. "I wanted to thank you," he explained, "for not throwing us out, for teaching me. I got promoted at the hardware store. Assistant manager now. I'm saving up." For the first time, I saw pride in him that wasn't built on arrogance but on effort. Real effort. We ate together quietly, and for a moment I allowed myself to feel something almost like forgiveness. Almost. Claire, however, remained icy. At every encounter, she avoided my gaze. When she delivered rent, she set the envelope on the counter and left without a word, but her silence spoke volumes. She was crumbling under the weight of her pride. One afternoon, I overheard her in the garden muttering to a neighbor, "She's ruined us," she hissed. My own mother making me pay to live in my house? I'll never forgive her. The neighbor didn't answer, just looked uncomfortable. And that was victory enough, because even Claire knew deep down the truth. She had ruined herself. By October, the transformation was undeniable. Ethan was working full-time, paying his own way. Claire was subdued, quieter, less boastful. Even her husband, always passive, began to look at me differently. No longer dismissive, but wary. And me? I felt stronger than I had in years. I had gone from a discarded old woman to the master of their fate. But revenge, I realized, was not only about punishment. It was about clarity. About showing them the mirror they had refused to look into. The final blow came at Thanksgiving. I arrived with a bottle of wine, my head held high. The table was set, but the mood was tense. Claire forced a smile. Ethan kept his eyes down. Midway through dinner, I set down my fork and looked at them both. "Do you remember?" I asked softly. "The night you told me I didn't belong?" Claire stiffened. Ethan's face turned crimson. "I remember," Ethan whispered. "So do I said. "Every night since. But tonight, I want you both to remember something else." I reached into my purse and pulled out a single key, dangling it above the table. "This key," I said, "is to the house you live in. The house you thought was yours. But it isn't. It's mine. And every time you unlock that door, I want you to remember whose name is on the deed, whose money built those walls, whose love you spat on." Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, but she said nothing. Ethan bowed his head, silent. I set the key on the table and leaned back. "You wanted me gone, but here I am. Not as your burden, not as your maid, not as your extra mouth to feed. Here I am as your landlady, and you will never forget it." That night, as I drove back to my apartment, the autumn leaves swirling across the road, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Revenge hadn't erased the pain. It hadn't made me forget the sting of Ethan's words or Claire's betrayal. But it had given me something greater. Dignity. Power. The knowledge that I was not, and never would be, disposable. At home, I placed George's photograph on the windowsill and poured myself a glass of wine. "You were right," I whispered to him. "I finally stood up for myself, and they'll never look at me the same way again." I lifted the glass in a silent toast. To justice, to strength, to never belonging on anyone's terms but my own. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. Not the smile of someone seeking approval, but the smile of a woman who had claimed her place in the world once and for all.